9 Russian vehicles were reportedly destroyed, 4 others were damaged, and another mechanized attack in the Kramatorsk direction failed after several separate waves. But the most important part of this episode was not the final count of vehicles. The real story began earlier, with a Russian BTR rushing across exposed ground near Berdychi, while the infantry rode on top of the armored vehicle instead of staying inside it. That detail says a lot about the battlefield. The armored compartment was designed to protect soldiers from fragments, bullets, and the first seconds of contact. But on this front, the same closed space can become a deadly box if the vehicle hits a mine, or if an FPV drone strikes the hull at the right angle. So the soldiers were forced into a cruel choice. Inside the vehicle, they had armor around them. On top of it, they were visible and exposed. Neither option was safe. From Berdychi to Toretsk and then toward Kramatorsk, the same pattern appeared again and again. Russian forces tried to keep pressure on Ukraine with BTRs, tanks, mechanized infantry, and improvised extra armor. Ukraine answered with something more flexible: reconnaissance drones, FPV strike teams, Bradley fighting vehicles, artillery, and small special operations groups working together as one defensive system. This is why the battle matters beyond one destroyed vehicle. It shows how a mechanized assault can be broken not only by firepower, but by observation, timing, and the ability to strike the weak link at the exact moment it appears. So the key question is simple: why do Russian armored attacks keep entering zones where Ukrainian drones are already waiting? And what does this reveal about Moscow's larger offensive approach? After the fall of Avdiivka, Russia did not stop to consolidate in a slow and cautious way. It tried to carry the momentum farther west. Berdychi became part of that pressure. The goal was not only to occupy ground, but to prevent Ukrainian defenders from breathing, rebuilding, and preparing new lines. If Ukrainian units could be kept under constant stress, Russian commanders hoped that small gaps would appear. Those gaps could then be widened by the next wave. The method was familiar but risky. Instead of relying only on one large armored column, Russian forces pushed forward smaller assault groups carried by BTR armored vehicles. A BTR could bring infantry closer to the line much faster than soldiers moving on foot. It could cross open stretches, deliver men to a drop-off point, and then leave before Ukrainian fire became too concentrated. If the infantry survived the arrival and reached houses, tree lines, or damaged buildings, that small position could become the start of something larger. Ukrainian UAVs were already watching the approaches toward Berdychi. A Russian vehicle entering the field did not move into empty space. It moved into a monitored zone. The drone view turned every decision into visible information: where the vehicle came from, where it slowed, where the infantry might dismount, and where the next vehicle might appear. That meant the battle began before the first explosion. The image of soldiers riding on top of the BTR showed how much confidence in armor had been shaken. If they stayed inside, they had protection from small arms and fragments. But they also risked being trapped if the vehicle caught fire or if the hull was penetrated. A mine under the vehicle could turn the lower compartment into a place with almost no escape. An FPV drone hitting the rear or engine area could force a sudden stop and create panic before anyone understood what had happened. This contradiction weakened the assault before the decisive strike. Russia still needed armored carriers to move infantry quickly, but the infantry's behavior showed that the vehicle was no longer trusted as a safe shield. The BTR remained useful, but it was also a moving target. And once it slowed near Ukrainian positions, both the machine and the soldiers around it became part of the same vulnerable package. The BTR reached the drop-off area with a clear role. It had to bring troops close to Ukrainian lines, release them quickly, and either support them with fire or withdraw before it was destroyed. In a classic mechanized attack, the vehicle is more than transport. It is the bridge between movement and combat. It allows infantry to cross exposed ground and begin the fight with at least some protection. But in this case, that bridge broke almost immediately. After the soldiers dismounted, the BTR did not remain as a stable support platform. It moved back along the route it had used to enter. That left the assault group near Ukrainian positions without the armored cover that had made the approach possible. The infantry was suddenly separated from the machine that had carried it forward. That separation created the opening Ukraine needed. As the vehicle slowed and turned away, a Ukrainian FPV drone approached from the rear. The rear of an armored carrier is often one of the most vulnerable places in a close strike. It includes access points, engine areas, thinner surfaces, exposed equipment, and angles that are harder for the crew to protect. A drone does not always need to completely destroy the vehicle. It only needs to damage movement, start a fire, blind the crew, or force the driver into a bad decision. Then another FPV drone followed. The second strike showed that this was not simply a random attack on the nearest target. It was a focused effort to remove the vehicle after it had delivered infantry and before it could continue helping the assault. Once the BTR began burning, its role changed completely. It was no longer transport, cover, support, or a safe exit. It became a burning obstacle and a symbol of a broken plan. The important point is that Ukraine did not need to destroy the infantry first. By hitting the BTR, Ukrainian operators hit the structure of the assault. The vehicle connected several functions at once: movement, protection, fire support, and withdrawal. When that connection disappeared, the dismounted soldiers lost more than a machine. They lost the system that made their position workable. For the Russian soldiers already on the ground, the situation shifted within seconds. Their transport was burning behind them. Their route back was no longer reliable. Their ability to move as one group had been reduced. A wounded soldier was reportedly still on the vehicle, which turned the scene into a chaotic mix of rescue, combat, and withdrawal. That is exactly the kind of confusion a defender wants to create. Above the battlefield, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones continued to watch. That continuous observation mattered as much as the explosion. The infantry could not simply disappear after the BTR was hit. Every movement near the damaged position could be followed. Every attempt to crawl, regroup, or shift toward a wall became visible from above. The dismounted Russian group was now exposed near Ukrainian positions. It could no longer rely on the BTR to suppress fire, block a line of sight, or extract the troops if the fight turned against them. Each choice became worse than the last. Staying in place meant remaining under surveillance. Moving meant crossing ground without armored cover. Trying to reorganize meant giving Ukraine more time to adjust fire. At that moment, the episode stopped being a mechanized assault and became a stranded infantry problem. The carrier that was supposed to create pressure had been removed. The men left behind were trapped in a narrower, harsher fight. And that is when the next Ukrainian tool became decisive: the M2 Bradley. Once the Russian infantry was separated from its vehicle, the Bradley could shape the battle in the next few minutes. This was not a long-range exchange with both sides carefully maneuvering. It was a close, compressed engagement where time was short and every exposed movement mattered. The Russian group had reached the edge of the Ukrainian position, but it had not built control. That made it vulnerable to an armored response. The Bradley's 25mm Bushmaster cannon became the central weapon in this phase. Against heavy armor from the front, this cannon is not always a guaranteed solution. But against infantry, light cover, damaged buildings, and thin walls, it is extremely dangerous. Rapid 25mm fire can tear through windows, weak structures, doors, fences, and the edges of cover that might protect soldiers from ordinary rifle fire. This mattered because the Russian infantry was not spread across a deep position. They were concentrated near buildings and access points after leaving the BTR. The same structures that were supposed to give them shelter became fixed targets. Once the Bradley opened fire, the soldiers had little room to maneuver. The cannon did not only cause damage, it controlled movement. A soldier under that kind of fire cannot easily cross a yard, move from one room to another, or gather with others to continue the attack. The pressure is immediate. The sound, impact, and fragmentation create a situation where every second spent in the wrong place can be fatal. The reported distance made the engagement even more severe. The Bradley was described as firing at extremely close range, nearly point blank for an armored vehicle. The Bradley turned the nearby ground into a trap. It could shift position, fire quickly, and punish exposed movement faster than the Russian soldiers could adapt. This also shows the specific role of Bradley vehicles in Ukrainian defense. They are not invulnerable, and they are not magic weapons. Mines, anti-armor systems, artillery, and FPV drones remain serious threats. But when an opening appears, a Bradley can become a mobile fire point. Near Berdychi, the result was a clear warning. When Russian infantry loses vehicle support close to Ukrainian lines, the danger does not end with the burning carrier. It can become worse. Isolation gives Ukrainian armor a short but powerful window. In that window, the Bradley turned a failed delivery of troops into a close-range defeat. But Russia did not stop after that first failure. Another BTR was sent toward the same general area with more infantry. This is one of the most important parts of the episode. The ground had already shown itself to be dangerous. Ukrainian drones had already watched the route. A previous vehicle had already been hit. Yet the next armored carrier still moved forward. The second BTR advanced through a mined and watched zone at speed. It carried improvised extra protection on the front, as if added armor and momentum could reduce the threat. But the route was no longer unknown. It had become a marked corridor. The defenders had already seen where the first vehicle went, where the infantry dismounted, where the burning wreck was located, and which nearby structures mattered. The new BTR stopped close to the previous wreck. That made the incoming troops even more predictable. The damaged vehicle, the buildings, and the open ground formed a familiar map for Ukrainian crews. From above, defenders could compare the second movement to the first failed attempt. That gave them a better idea of where the next dismount might happen and where fire should be concentrated. The most vulnerable moment came again during the dismount. When soldiers leave an armored vehicle, they are between two states. They are no longer protected by the vehicle, but they have not yet reached solid cover. They are close enough to be under direct fire, but not yet organized enough to fight efficiently. A successful mechanized assault depends on surviving that short transition. Near Berdychi, Ukraine punished that transition. Bradley fire struck from the front before the Russian troops could spread out, enter buildings properly, or turn the drop-off point into a real foothold. The sequence that should have been fast and disciplined collapsed at the weakest point. Vehicle arrives, soldiers exit, infantry moves into cover, support fire protects the shift. That is the ideal version. In reality, the Russian group was caught between transport and combat. Ukrainian UAVs made the situation worse for the attackers. From above, they recorded the movement and kept the area under watch. A wrecked BTR might hide a soldier from one ground-level angle, and a broken wall might block one line of sight, but neither could erase movement from the sky. The second assault showed that Ukraine was not simply reacting. It was learning from each Russian attempt and turning the terrain into a prepared fire pocket. Every pause gave Ukraine another opening. Every attempt to hide kept Russian troops near wrecks and damaged structures that drones could still watch. Every new vehicle risked entering a battlefield shaped by the last failure. That is why the repeated pushes near Berdychi are more important than one dramatic clip. They show how a failed first assault can prepare the ground for the failure of the next one. From Berdychi, the wider picture moves toward Donetsk and Toretsk, where the battle took a different form. There, Ukrainian forces were not only fighting vehicles in open ground, they were dealing with Russian troops in buildings, rooms, basements, stairwells, and narrow urban spaces. In that environment, drones and armored fire still matter, but they do not solve every problem. In Donetsk area fighting, Ukrainian forces encountered a small Russian reconnaissance group that had moved behind or near Ukrainian lines. Once enemy soldiers are inside a building, the problem becomes more complicated. The target is no longer a vehicle crossing a field. It is a person behind a wall, a door, a corner, or a stairwell. A drone may show the building, but not every room. Fire from outside may pressure the position, but not always confirm what is happening inside. Ukrainian soldiers approached the building, used an explosive device to open access, and called on the men inside to surrender. That detail shows the balance of the situation. Capturing soldiers can bring valuable information. It can also avoid unnecessary losses if the enemy gives up. But entering a structure is one of the most dangerous things soldiers can do. A doorway may hide a weapon. A hallway may become a killing zone. A room may appear empty until someone moves. One Russian soldier surrendered, while another did not immediately follow. The moment became unstable. One captured man tried to speak to the second, creating a strange and dangerous pause. It was not a clean battlefield scene. It was a tense negotiation in a space where nobody had complete control. Then the remaining soldier threw a grenade toward the Ukrainian special forces. That action ended the attempt to resolve the encounter without further violence. Toretsk showed another solution. Instead of storming upward through a building used by Russian forces, Ukrainian special operators attacked the structure itself. They entered lower levels, placed TM-62 mines with timed fuses, and withdrew before the explosion. The goal was not to clear every room with rifles and grenades. The goal was to remove the strongpoint entirely. This choice was practical. Tall or solid buildings can become dangerous military positions. They provide observation, shelter, firing angles, and a base for troops to control nearby roads. If Ukrainian soldiers tried to clear such a building floor by floor, they would be exposed to defenders above them, hidden firing points, and booby traps. A stairwell can become a vertical battlefield where the attacker is always at a disadvantage. The broader lesson from Donetsk and Toretsk is that Ukraine is matching the method to the target. A small group hidden inside a house may require a close raid and a surrender attempt. A larger strongpoint in a building may require demolition. A vehicle crossing open ground may require FPV strikes. Infantry trying to consolidate near a wreck may require Bradley fire. This layered flexibility is what makes the Ukrainian defense difficult to overcome. On the Kramatorsk axis, the battle expanded into a bigger test of Ukraine's drone-based defense. Russia did not send a single vehicle or one small patrol. It launched repeated waves with tanks and armored vehicles, trying to force Ukrainian positions to absorb pressure over time. The purpose was clear. If enough waves came, Ukrainian drone teams might run short of drones, batteries, munitions, focus, or available operators. Russian vehicles also showed signs of adaptation. Many carried metal chains, rubber sheets, cages, screens, and additional armor around vulnerable areas. These modifications were meant to interfere with FPV strikes. A chain screen may detonate or deflect a warhead before it reaches a clean surface. Rubber or improvised panels may complicate the strike angle. Extra armor may protect an area that operators often target. That detail matters because it proves Russia understood the threat. It was not blindly ignoring FPV drones. It was trying to reduce their effect. But passive protection can only solve part of the problem. It may make one strike less effective. It may protect one angle. It may force a drone operator to choose another approach. But it cannot remove the larger danger created by constant observation and layered Ukrainian fire. Ukraine answered the Russian waves with a system rather than a single weapon. Reconnaissance UAVs watched the routes and identified where the next group was moving. FPV drones struck vehicles when they slowed, turned, bunched up, or exposed a weak point. Artillery and other fires pressured the approach areas. If Russian soldiers escaped from damaged vehicles, Ukraine shifted attention onto the exposed infantry before they reached secure cover. Still, the defense was not free for Ukraine. Stopping multiple waves required a heavy use of drones and attention. FPV drones are not unlimited. Batteries must be charged, operators get tired, launch teams need supplies, damaged equipment must be replaced. Communications must remain stable despite electronic warfare. A successful drone defense can still be expensive and exhausting. But in the described Kramatorsk battle, the Russian push did not break through. The reported result was 9 vehicles destroyed and 4 more damaged after several waves. That outcome shows that extra armor and repeated pressure did not solve the core issue. Once the vehicles were detected, they entered a battlefield shaped by timing, visibility, and rapid strikes. Every wave paid a price before it could reach the Ukrainian forward line. From Berdychi to Toretsk and Kramatorsk, the same deeper story emerges. This is not only about one BTR, one Bradley, one drone strike, or one special operations raid. It is about a battlefield where movement itself has become dangerous. Russian assaults are not simply meeting resistance at the trench line. They are being observed, measured, and attacked before they can become breakthroughs. UAVs find the movement, FPV drones hit the weak point, Bradley fire or artillery punishes exposed infantry. special operations teams deal with enemy groups that survive inside buildings. Each tool fills a different role. Together, they shorten the time between Russian movement and Ukrainian response. That creates a major problem for Russian offensive strategy. Mechanized pressure depends on several things: surprise, timing, protected movement, coordination between infantry and vehicles, and the ability to turn a small gain into a stable position. Ukrainian observation attacks each of those requirements. If the route is seen early, surprise disappears. If the vehicle is hit during the dismount, timing breaks. If infantry is separated from armor, coordination collapses. If a foothold is cleared quickly, the small gain cannot grow. The central weakness is not only the quality of one vehicle or one unit, it is the gap between the old logic of mechanized assault and the new reality of constant aerial observation. In older conditions, a vehicle could rush across dangerous ground and hope to reach cover before the defender reacted. Now the defender may already be watching before the vehicle starts moving. The decisive moment happens earlier. This changes the meaning of armor. Armor still matters. It can protect crews from fragments, small arms, and some near misses. It can carry troops through areas that would be impossible on foot. It can deliver firepower. But armor no longer guarantees that an assault can survive the approach. If the vehicle is seen, tracked, isolated, and struck at the right angle, its value can collapse quickly. It also changes the role of infantry. Dismounted troops are still necessary to hold ground. Drones cannot occupy a building. Artillery cannot check every basement. A Bradley cannot replace soldiers clearing a trench. But infantry that arrives without timing and support becomes exposed. The moment between leaving the vehicle and reaching real cover has become one of the most dangerous moments in modern combat. This is why the Berdychi episode is so revealing. The Russian infantry reached the area. The BTR did its first job. But the system around that movement failed. The vehicle was hit. The infantry was isolated. The Bradley exploited the opening. The second wave repeated the same risk in terrain Ukraine already understood. What looked like pressure became repetition under observation. The Kramatorsk waves show the larger operational warning. Russia can add metal chains, rubber sheets, cages, and extra armor. It can send several waves instead of one. It can try to exhaust Ukrainian drone crews. But unless it can disrupt Ukrainian observation, protect vehicles from FPV strikes more actively, coordinate infantry and armor more effectively, and suppress the defenders before the approach, the same pattern may continue. The battle therefore becomes a contest between pressure and precision. Russia tries to create pressure through repeated movement, armor, and manpower. Ukraine tries to turn that movement into targets through drones, timing, and layered fire. The side that sees first often gains the right to shape what happens next. The side that is seen first is forced to react. For Moscow, the warning is clear. Continuing to push mechanized assaults without solving the drone problem means accepting heavy losses for uncertain gains. For Ukraine, the challenge is also clear. The defensive network works only if observation, communication, drones, artillery, armored fire, and infantry action remain connected. If one layer weakens, Russian pressure may find space. That is the real meaning of these battles. They are not only separate clips of destroyed vehicles or burning armor. They show the transformation of war at the tactical level. A BTR is no longer just a carrier, it is a visible node in a chain. A drone is no longer just a camera, it is the start of a fire plan. A Bradley is no longer only a vehicle, it is a fast response tool when enemy infantry loses cover. A building is no longer just shelter, it can be a trap, a target, or a strong point that must be removed. From Berdychi to Toretsk and Kramatorsk, Russia brought vehicles, infantry, and pressure. Ukraine answered with observation, timing, and layered response. The result was another costly lesson in a war where the sky has become part of every ground battle. If Russian commanders cannot protect their assaults from being seen and broken before they form, every new push may repeat the same sequence: movement, detection, disruption, isolation, and loss. And that is why this story matters. It is not about celebrating destruction. It is about understanding how quickly modern war punishes old assumptions. Armor without awareness becomes a target. Speed without concealment becomes a signal. Infantry without support becomes isolated, and every battlefield decision now happens under the eyes of drones that can turn one exposed moment into the collapse of an entire assault. If this kind of analysis helps you understand how modern combat is changing, follow Military Force for more breakdowns of weapons, battles, and the future of warfare. Because behind every destroyed vehicle and every failed assault, there is a larger lesson about the real cost of war, the speed of technological change, and why peace should never be treated as something guaranteed. The main message remains clear: the attack is no longer decided only by how many vehicles enter the field. It is decided by who controls the space before the first vehicle reaches the line. In this environment, every road, tree line, ruined house, and drop-off point can become part of a larger trap if it is watched from above and connected to fast fire on the ground.